Imagine waking up one day, feeling the weight of your own existence more than ever before. The air in your lungs seems too thick, the world outside your window too distant, and every passing second feels like a countdown to something inevitable. You look around, noticing the surface of your life, the routine, the responsibilities, the endless distractions. But beneath it all, there is a nagging discomfort. It's not just fear. It's something deeper, something that stretches its tendrils through every part of you. You know it's there, lurking in the corners of your mind, but you don't know what it is. What if you are the one holding yourself back? What if the only thing separating you from living fully is not some external force, but your own fears? Fears you have never fully confronted, never fully understood. This isn't a question of courage. It's not about being braver than others or pushing through the pain. This is something more insidious. What if your fear is not just a reaction to life's difficulties, but an intrinsic part of who you are, a force so deeply embedded in your psyche that it controls the way you see the world, how you approach challenges, how you build relationships, and even how you perceive your very self-worth? Have you ever stopped to consider that the way you live might be shaped less by external circumstances and more by an inner fear, one that whispers in your ear, urging you to stay small, to avoid the unknown, to remain safe in your comfort zone? And if so, what would it take for you to break free from this paralyzing hold? Carl Jung, the great Swiss psychiatrist, once said, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are." But can you ever truly become yourself if you are living in the shadow of fear? How much of your potential, your joy, your very essence is being stifled by the quiet whisper of your own anxieties? This question isn't something to be answered lightly. It requires introspection, courage, and a willingness to confront the darkness within. The fear that holds you back is not always obvious. It can disguise itself as procrastination, self-doubt, or even perfectionism. It can hide behind rationalizations and excuses, making you believe that you are merely waiting for the right moment or preparing for the right opportunity. But what if that moment never comes? What if the right opportunity is always just out of reach because you're too afraid to step into the unknown? The truth is, this fear will never just go away. It will continue to shape your reality unless you choose to confront it. But how? How do you overcome the invisible force that has shaped your entire life, perhaps without your ever realizing it? And most importantly, if you could confront this fear and truly let go of it, what would it mean for your life? What kind of freedom would you experience? How would you live if you were no longer bound by the shackles of your own making? This is where the journey begins. To unravel the deep, often hidden layers of your fear, you must first understand its roots. What does it truly mean to let go of your fears and start living fully? To answer that, we need to look inside, deep inside, and confront the very essence of what holds us back. What if the fears that keep you from living fully are not random or isolated? What if they are deeply embedded within the core of your psyche, waiting for the right moment to manifest in your life? These fears are not just a result of your external circumstances. They are a reflection of something much deeper, a deep psychological and existential struggle that has been with you since you were born. Carl Jung, one of the foremost thinkers on the human psyche, believed that the unconscious mind holds far more power over our lives than we care to acknowledge. In his view, much of the human experience is shaped by the unconscious, which operates beneath the surface, quietly influencing our thoughts, feelings, and actions. Our fears, then, are not just random emotional reactions. They're often a result of unresolved conflicts, repressed desires, and unacknowledged parts of ourselves. Jung called this the shadow, the part of the psyche that contains all that we suppress, deny, or fail to integrate. This shadow is made up of our hidden fears, weaknesses, and unresolved pain. It's the part of us that we try to hide, even from ourselves, because it makes us uncomfortable. But what if this shadow is not just something to be ignored or avoided? What if it's a part of you that needs to be confronted in order to live fully? Fear, then, is not merely something external that happens to you. It is a reflection of the parts of yourself you are unwilling to face. Every time you shrink from a challenge, every time you make an excuse to avoid discomfort, you're allowing your fears to shape your reality, reinforcing the very thing that keeps you from growing. This phenomenon is not just psychological. It's deeply philosophical. The fear you experience when you attempt to take risks or step into the unknown has roots in some of the oldest existential questions humanity has grappled with. Friedrich Nietzsche, the German philosopher, spoke of the will to power, the intrinsic drive for individuals to assert their own will and become who they truly are. But this is often blocked by fear, the fear of failure, of uncertainty, of death itself. Nietzsche also warned of eternal recurrence, the idea that if we do not confront our fears and live fully, we risk repeating our lives in a loop of regret and missed opportunities. But it is not just Nietzsche who speaks of fear's power. Jean-Paul Sartre, the existentialist philosopher, explored the idea of bad faith, the tendency for individuals to live inauthentically, hiding behind socially constructed roles, external expectations, or self-imposed limitations. Sartre argued that we live in a state of constant anxiety, as we are acutely aware of our freedom and the responsibility that comes with it. Our fear of making the wrong choices, of stepping into the unknown, create a paralysis that prevents us from truly living as our authentic selves. Viktor Frankl, the psychiatrist and Holocaust survivor, offered another profound perspective on fear in his work, Man's Search for Meaning. Frankl discovered that, even in the most horrific circumstances, those who found meaning in their suffering were the ones who survived. Frankl's philosophy centered around the idea that fear and suffering can be transcended when we find purpose. But to do so, one must face the fear of the unknown, the fear of death, and the fear of personal insignificance. He argued that those who let go of these fears and fully embrace their freedom were the ones who ultimately found fulfillment in life. At the heart of this psychological and philosophical conundrum is the question of freedom. Freedom, in its truest sense, requires the courage to confront what frightens you. It is a realization that every fear you hold, the fear of failure, the fear of rejection, the fear of pain, exists because you have created it. You have given it power. And in doing so, you have limited your potential. You may feel that your fears are something beyond your control, but this is precisely where the paradox lies. You are not at the mercy of your fears. You have given them control. The fear of failure, for example, is not merely a reaction to potential consequences. It is an internalized belief, deeply rooted in your psyche, that failure is something to be avoided at all costs, that it represents a reflection of your inadequacy or worthlessness. But if you start to question this belief, you will begin to see something profound. What if failure isn't the end of the road, but rather an essential part of growth? What if you could reframe failure as a teacher, a guide that shows you the path forward? Would you still fear it, or would you embrace it as a necessary step toward realizing your true potential? This is where the psychological and philosophical roots of fear begin to intertwine. The fear you experience is not just an emotion. It is a reflection of the deep-seated beliefs you hold about yourself, about life, and about what it means to be human. These beliefs have been shaped by societal forces, by past experiences, by unresolved conflicts within your own psyche. And to truly let go of your fears, you must confront and re-examine these beliefs. You must face your shadow and, in doing so, release the chains that have bound you to a life half-lived. But this is not easy. It is a journey of deep introspection, where you must challenge everything you have come to believe. But what is the alternative? To live in fear? To continue to exist, never truly living? The choice, in the end, is yours. We often speak of fear as if it were a singular, identifiable enemy, but in reality, it is a quiet infiltrator, subtly working behind the scenes, shaping our lives in ways we rarely recognize. Its influence is so pervasive that, over time, we may become desensitized to its presence. We may believe that we are living fully, when in fact we are merely existing within the narrow confines of the lives we constructed out of fear. Fear operates not just at the level of individual experience, but also within societal structures, often determining the paths we choose and the dreams we dared pursue. It becomes part of the framework of our reality, woven into the very fabric of culture, tradition, and social norms. You may think you are making conscious decisions, but how often do these decisions mirror the expectations of society? How much of your life is dictated by the fear of judgment, of not measuring up to others' standards, or failing to conform to a prescribed mold? Let's take a moment to look at how fear infiltrates our personal lives. Think about a decision you've made recently, big or small. Did you hesitate? Were you uncertain about whether it was the right choice? What stopped you from taking immediate action? Often, the answer is not logic, but fear. Fear of the unknown, fear of making a mistake, fear of the consequences. And sometimes, the fear is so insidious that it doesn't even present itself as an obvious barrier. Instead, it manifests as procrastination, indecision, or rationalization, subtle forms of avoidance that quietly hold you back. For instance, many people feel a profound sense of dissatisfaction in their careers, but instead of pursuing their true passion, they remain in jobs they find unfulfilling. Why? Because the fear of instability, the fear of failure, the fear of rejection looms larger than the possibility of personal fulfillment. They rationalize it by saying, I can't afford to take a risk right now, or I don't have the qualifications to do something I truly love. But what if these fears are simply echoes of outdated beliefs, relics of a past that no longer serves you? This unseen influence extends beyond the personal into the collective, affecting entire communities and even nations. Think about societal norms, the pressure to conform, to succeed, to compete. This collective fear of not fitting in or not being enough often drives people to follow predetermined paths. But this conformity comes at a cost. People are living lives that are not their own, chasing after goals that are not intrinsically theirs, all because they fear being left behind or forgotten. Fear also plays a significant role in how we see ourselves. How often have you thought, I am not enough? This feeling of inadequacy is at the root of many emotional and psychological struggles. It's a belief that we are flawed, that we don't deserve happiness, success, or love. But why do we feel this way? Why do so many people internalize such a limiting negative self-view? It is fear once again. Fear of rejection, fear of judgment, fear of being unworthy. And when we believe we are unworthy, we unconsciously settle for less than what we deserve. We settle for relationships, jobs, and lives that do not fulfill us, simply because we fear the unknown path of self-empowerment. On a broader scale, the consequences of fear can be seen in the way we interact with the world. We live in an age of heightened anxiety, a time when mental health issues are more prominent than ever. Anxiety disorders, depression, and existential crises are on the rise. And a significant part of this is due to the fear-based culture in which we live. Media, politics, and social pressures create a climate of fear, manipulating us to act out of insecurity rather than confidence. Fear feeds off uncertainty. And when we live in a world full of rapid change, economic instability, and social polarization, we are often left feeling powerless. This powerlessness feeds into a cycle of fear, where the more we try to control our environment, the more we are paralyzed by it. The result? We retreat inward, closing ourselves off from growth, from change, from possibility. We choose comfort over challenge, certainty over curiosity, safety over freedom. These consequences aren't limited to the individual. They affect the entire collective experience. Imagine a society where everyone is afraid to take risks, to challenge the status quo, or to express their true selves. What kind of world would that be? A world where innovation is stifled, creativity is suppressed, and potential is wasted? That's the kind of world we are shaping if we continue to live in fear. The truth is, the consequences of fear are not always immediate. It doesn't always appear as a dramatic failure or crisis. More often, fear shows up in the small, everyday moments, the hesitation before making a decision, the procrastination that turns into years of unfulfilled dreams, the deep sense of dissatisfaction that we try to ignore but can never escape. These small moments accumulate, forming a pattern that can define an entire lifetime. Fear has a way of sneaking into every corner of our lives, and its effects are subtle but profound. It influences how we relate to others, how we interact with our environment, and how we see ourselves. The consequences are not always obvious, but they are felt, and over time, they can add up to a life that feels incomplete, stagnant, and unfulfilled. So what can we do about this? How do we break free from this unseen, insidious force that keeps us from living fully? The answer lies in a radical shift in perspective, a challenge to everything we have come to believe about fear, about ourselves, and about what it means to live fully. To break free from the grasp of fear, you must first understand that the very notion of fear is not your enemy. It's your mind's way of telling you that something is wrong. But instead of succumbing to this force, you can use it as a catalyst for transformation. To reclaim control over your life and experience true freedom, you must learn to not only face fear, but to reinterpret it. The first step in this rebellion is a radical shift in perspective. What if fear was not something to be avoided, but something to be embraced? Yes, embraced. Imagine the possibility of welcoming fear as an ally, rather than a foe. This is a concept that can seem counterintuitive, even paradoxical. After all, isn't the purpose of fear to warn us, to protect us from harm? Isn't it there to keep us safe? On the surface, fear is a survival mechanism designed to keep us from danger, but it has evolved into something more complex, something that inhibits growth and creativity, preventing us from realizing our full potential. In the face of fear, most people freeze. They shrink back, paralyzed by the potential of failure or discomfort. But what if that very fear was a signpost pointing towards something worth pursuing? Take a moment and think about the most courageous acts throughout history. From explorers who sailed into uncharted waters to artists who exposed their raw, vulnerable selves through their work. From inventors who dared to dream of the impossible to social activists who challenged oppressive systems. The one thing these figures all had in common was their ability to face fear head-on and act anyway. They did not dismiss their fear. They acknowledged it, understood it, and moved forward despite it. What if you could do the same? What if fear wasn't a wall to stop you, but a bridge to cross in order to get closer to who you were meant to be? To rebel against fear is to recognize that the most profound transformation in life often happens outside of your comfort zone. You see, comfort zones are prisons. They are places where we feel secure, but also where we remain stagnant. The world outside, full of uncertainty and risk, is the place where growth happens. To truly live fully, you must be willing to venture into the unknown, to take that first step into discomfort and trust that the fear you feel is only a sign of potential for something extraordinary. This is where the psychological shift happens. You must learn to take action despite fear. This is not about eliminating fear. After all, fear will always be with us. It's about making fear your companion, rather than your master. Every time you feel it, instead of retreating, you step forward. You take that leap of faith. Not because you know the outcome, but because you understand that only through action will you evolve. One radical example of breaking free from fear comes from Viktor Frankl, whose experiences in the concentration camps of Nazi Germany could have broken anyone's spirit. But Frankl, instead of succumbing to despair, found a way to reclaim his own freedom by choosing his attitude in the face of unimaginable suffering. He argued that no matter the circumstances, we are always free to choose how we respond to fear and suffering. Frankl's experience teaches us that freedom is not about external circumstances. It is about how we confront the internal forces that seek to control us. And just as Frankl discovered, the freedom to live fully comes when you stop seeing yourself as a victim of your fears. What if, instead of seeing fear as something to conquer, you started seeing it as an invitation? An invitation to do the very thing that you most resist. Think about a time in your life when you were truly alive, when you were doing something that stretched you, something that terrified you but excited you at the same time. Was it worth it? Was the fear you felt in those moments something that you look back on with regret? Or was it a sign that you were in the process of becoming the person you were meant to be? The process of rebellion is not an easy one. It requires you to confront your fears directly, to stop running from them. But in doing so, you'll uncover a new reality, one where you have power over the fear that once controlled you. When you begin to see fear for what it truly is, a natural, often inevitable part of the human experience, then you can step beyond it, using it as a tool to push your boundaries and explore new horizons. Consider the personal stories of individuals who have made radical changes in their lives. Some have left safe, predictable careers to follow their passions. Others have traveled to foreign lands, challenging not just their comfort zones, but their entire worldview. And still, others have faced their deepest personal fears of rejection, failure, or inadequacy, and moved forward anyway. What these stories share is a common thread: the realization that the things that scare you the most often hold the key to your liberation. You are more powerful than you realize. Fear only has the control you give it. And once you stop giving it power, you will realize that fear is simply a messenger, not a master. So, how do you begin this rebellion? How do you start stepping into fear instead of running from it? It begins with one simple yet radical choice. Decide that you will no longer be defined by your fears. Each small decision to act in the face of fear, whether it's starting a difficult conversation, trying something new, or taking that first step toward your dreams, will gradually erode the power fear holds over you. The moment you make this choice, the shift begins. The rebellion starts in your mind, in your perception of fear. Once you understand that fear is not the enemy, but a part of the process, you'll begin to see opportunities where before you only saw obstacles. Now that you have challenged your fear, embraced its presence, and begun to take steps into the unknown, there comes a moment, a realization, that will change everything. This is the moment when fear loses its power over you. It is the moment when the very thing that once held you captive becomes the doorway to your freedom. The ultimate truth is not one that can be taught or explained. It must be experienced. It is something that can only be realized after you have faced the depth of your own fears and ventured into the unknown. It is a truth that reveals itself only when you understand, on a profound level, that you are the one who has been standing in your own way all along. What if the greatest fear of all, the one that keeps you from living fully, is not the fear of failure or rejection or pain, but the fear of your own potential, the fear of becoming who you truly are? What if deep down you have been avoiding your own greatness, not because you fear the world, but because you fear the responsibility that comes with it? This is the deepest, most unsettling truth. To live fully is to embrace the vastness of your own potential, the potential that has been suppressed, ignored, or hidden by your fears. The moment you begin to confront your fears, you start to unravel the layers of conditioning, beliefs, and limitations that have been placed upon you since childhood. These are the walls that have confined you to a life of half-lived experiences, a life where you're always just out of reach of your own truth. But in facing your fear, you realize something profound. The world is not as you've been taught to see it. The barriers that once seemed insurmountable, the limitations you thought were permanent, begin to dissolve. You understand that fear was never the obstacle. It was the lens through which you viewed the world. Once that lens shatters, you see the world through a new, liberated perspective. You see endless possibility where there was once limitation. You see opportunity where there was once fear. This final realization is deeply philosophical in nature. It echoes the words of Carl Jung when he spoke of individuation, the process of becoming whole by integrating all aspects of the self. It is the recognition that the person you were meant to be is not someone separate from you, but someone you already are, waiting to be discovered. The fear, the doubts, the insecurities, they are simply masks, illusions designed to keep you from this truth. And as you come to understand this, a new freedom arises. You are no longer bound by the fears of what could go wrong, of what others might think, or the uncertainty of the unknown. You are free to act, to create, to love, and to live in the fullest sense of the word. But here's the paradox. Living fully is not about eliminating fear altogether. It is about understanding that fear will always be a part of you, but that it no longer controls you. Fear becomes a force that propels you forward, not the force that holds you back. You now realize that the very thing you feared, the unknown, is where life truly begins. The moment you stop running from fear, you stop running from life itself. You stop living in the shadows of your own self-doubt and start living in the fullness of your own truth. This ultimate realization is liberating because it shows you that you are not defined by what you fear. You are defined by what you choose to do in the face of it. Every step you take toward embracing fear is a step toward embracing your true self. And in that act of embracing, you reclaim your power, your freedom, and your ability to create the life you were always meant to live. As you look at the world with this new perspective, you begin to see the infinite potential in every moment. You no longer wait for life to come to you. You step into it. You no longer fear failure or rejection, because you understand that both are simply steps on the path to growth. And you begin to realize that the greatest freedom of all is not in avoiding fear, but in choosing to live fully despite it. This, then, is the ultimate truth, that life is not something to be survived, but something to be fully embraced. And the moment you let go of your fears and start living with intention, you will find that life, with all its challenges and uncertainties, becomes a vast, open field of possibility, waiting for you to step into it. As you take that first step, remember this: the greatest adventures the deepest fulfillment, and the richest experiences lie on the other side of fear. And when you cross that threshold, you will understand that it was never about overcoming fear. It was about realizing that the life you wanted was always within your reach. You simply had to stop fearing it.